tie that into positive and negative numbers, but it gets a bit messy, so we didn't really pursue that.
Messiness is good. I mean, you look at this video and it does look like some sort of crime scene investigation where they're plotting the kind of deterioration of a cult. It's basically then gone out to sea with any number theory.
I'm just curious about the word dramatisation, and I know it was touched on earlier, but dramatisation, demonstration, illustration. And it is looking at art and artists staging, so I presume transcending it from simply becoming a demonstration of a process. And I just wondered what both of the participants felt about where after the week you think you are with that inquiry.
I should just give a brief note to say, as I think I explained earlier in the week, I took this notion of dramatisation from Deleuze, where, to be very brief about it, what's really important about it is that it's not simply a kind of Platonic transcription of the ideal into instances. So it's not like the ideal circle is instantiated in all the circles in the world. It's the idea that between the ideal realm and the real, a kind of twisting occurs. And so, in that sense, that was what we were trying to understand, is what happens when you start to try and draw down these ideas into material reality, and what kind of twistings occur. So, yeah, I think hopefully, I think it did become in the latter half of the week, we began to just use this word, and it began to really make sense in the context of what we were doing. Matthew?
Well, yeah, I mean, this, in some sense, it certainly illustrates a point. You could say it dramatises it, and there's moving parts. But it's not. The question originally was how can art or artists dramatise, and it's debatable whether this could be considered art. It certainly wasn't intended that way, although it could perhaps be mutated into something that would be considered art. I personally don't concern myself too much with where the boundary lies. You could see art as a sort of subdivision of manufacturing if you wanted to be really broad and vague about it. But we've made something, and it illustrates a point. Whether it's art or not, but the interesting thing for me is the point I made earlier, that just by bringing it into physical reality in order to make the point to someone else, to other people, this has raised a question for me. Now, it may be a dead end, but it's a question I would never have thought about, which is there something between, if you move continuously from addition to multiplication in some sense that I can't make precise, do you pass through something about which you can mathematically say something meaningful or not? That's not a question mathematicians would ask. It's just that would not fall into the realm of mathematics. And like I said, it may not even mean anything, but it may go somewhere. And this dramatisation led me to do that. I've never attempted to. I've been writing a book which involves illustration, but something about this, creating something with moving parts and unexpected consequences, it's a different process which I've never done before, and there may be something to be said for that further dramatisations of similar concepts may lead to new lines of investigation.
And as I mentioned, I think we can understand the whole week's work as in the same way as moving parts and unintended consequences. That's kind of what happened. We played out this question ourselves. Conrad, what do you make of this notion of dramatisation? Is it of any use to you thinking about your own practice?
Well, I'm kind of quite worried about. I don't want to sort of dramatise. I mean, I've never really thought about it that much until this week, but it's made it much clearer to me that that's not what I do. So again, it's sort of about these. I think that I'm much more conscious about what I do than I have been in the past, and I think I've been quite lucky as an artist where I was trying to dramatise ideas, but I was failing in those tasks, and that was actually quite fortuitous, because at the time I was really trying to understand something myself by this actualization of a metaphor, but I was really quite unaware of what I was doing, articulating what I was doing, but I think it was, as I say, quite fortuitous that I wasn't succeeding in that dramatisation.
The conceptual question is whether you include that failure within the concept of dramatisation or not. If we distinguish between demonstration and dramatisation, you could say you failed at demonstration, but you succeeded in...
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, that's really bringing it down to the world and twisting it, like you said, in a Deleuzean sense. If you twist it so far, it becomes something else, it becomes broken, it becomes unrecognisable,
Yeah,
then is it dramatisation? I mean, you're just getting into definitions there.
But isn't that what we've been doing all week? Is seeing, you know,
How far can
trying
you twist
to
it before,
trying to circumscribe the limits of that twisting and how far you can go before you betray a concept. And I think that is a really core thing for me. Is this question of and you know, at a certain point, so I wouldn't say it became heated, but there was a certain kind of frustration going on between the two residents, and it was precisely this notion of betrayal, in a sense, is that if you take these concepts and use them in such transport them in this way and twist them, then are you simply betraying them? It doesn't have any relation to the
Yes,
initial
at what point do you just lose all contact? It's like this idea of tug of war, which I wasn't thinking about. Robin sort of talked about me sort of giving Conrad rope, like allowing him to take these ideas and play with them in ways I would never have thought of. But at a certain point, it's like, whoa, hang on, no. You know, I've run out of rope here. You've just gone with the rope, and what you're doing has no relationship at all to what we were talking about. But then, so it's attention. It was this continual process.
And as I said, I think it was
Sounds
I'd like to thank both the residents for showing such a massive amount of goodwill towards this kind of joint process, that they did allow each other as much rope as they could possibly give in both directions. I think that's what's made it such a successful project for me.
It's a slight tangent, but I was really struck when you talked about adding a single camera. There's a sort of perfect use by Plato's Cave is the fact that the rabbit, we don't know what the rabbit is.
We just have this flat.
We have seen the screen. We don't actually know
Yeah, absolutely.
what it is.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of the early stuff in the conversations we were having during the week was this idea. Again, it was this idea of the sort of shadows of the real, and the one kind of metaphor I used that I think you like quite a lot was this idea of we're all inside a box,
Yeah.
and we don't know. We know that box is very limited, and whether you see that box as this room and there's a vast expanse outside, but also the box is the limits of our own perceptions, the 5 senses that we have. And they're like almost these pinpricks in the walls of this box that we're inside, and we're just gleaning such sort of the infinite that's out there, this infinite amount of spectrum of information, and we have these sort of vast filters on ourselves. It's just like you can either see them as kind of these massive windows that we see through, or you can see them as these massive filters that are just filtering the infinite and the sort of everything. They're just sort of, but we're incredibly limited in what we're science and mathematics and are really trying to, and I think art to a certain extent, and certainly what I'm trying to do, is that they are attempting to see the invisible, or to understand, or to look at look at reality in different ways and interpret reality in different ways, and they both have a need to try and understand or objectify the world, and to see things, to see round the corner.
Yeah, I was just going to say round the corner. But art and science are both arguably in science certainly are periscopes, really, which are sort of sticking out of Plato's cave to try and see what's round the corner.
And another thing that came up with these screens was I had a similar thing. It was actually just and I made it with 2 cameras. It was like a digital periscope, but it had 2 cameras on mirrors on sort of axes here, and I was wearing it like a kind of insect, kind of like a stick insect head. And then I had 2 monitors here, and I was sort of it was a sort of performance piece when I was at the Ruskin. And it would basically, all it would do would extend my line of vision so my eyes would effectively be much further apart. But essentially, I would be seeing the same thing, but through this black and white monitors here. But it was just a sort of way of objectifying the way we see. It was just it's a metaphor for what science does, I guess. Or what we're always trying to do is trying to create a rational experiment to objectify what we're looking at. And